Hey everyone, I'm Jonathan Shaw, and in this video, we're going to talk about behaviors, how behaviors get triggered, the different types of behaviors that we can all go through, and why some of them are really subtle and why some of them are really obvious, and why sometimes we try to avoid them and pretend like they're not happening and try and get away from them, even though we still keep doing them. What causes us to do that? What causes us to do the same behavior over and over again, even when we know we're doing it and we can't seem to stop ourselves? So in this video, in the past videos, we talked about memories and triggers, and now we're going to come on to behaviors. So when you have a negative memory, that creates a trigger, and then when you get triggered, you then behave in a certain way. And there are all sorts of different behaviors. I'm sure you know that there are extreme behaviors from violence to to abuse, all the way down to just withdrawing and being quite shy and quiet and not speaking up. These are all behaviors, or even going inside your head and thinking about things, analyzing. That's a behavior. Believe it or not, that's actually a behavior. Chewing things over, that's a behavior. That used to be one of my things. I used to go in my head as well and analyze quite a bit. One of my behaviors that get triggered, and it was really subtle. So some behaviors are really obvious, like getting really angry all the time, or shouting and screaming when things don't go your way, or whatever it is. So the behavior to get angry can be triggered in multiple ways. And one of the ways mine used to get triggered was really, really random. And I think I've mentioned it before, but what would happen is I'd drop my keys. And every time I dropped my keys, that was the trigger, seeing the keys drop and hearing the keys drop. And then I'd get really angry at the keys. That was my behavior. My behavior was to shout and scream at the keys, which is completely ridiculous. We can all see that's nonsense. That's a load of twaddle. It just doesn't make logical sense. But that's what I used to do until I finally switched the trigger off with DTO. So once I switched the trigger off, I actually stopped doing that. But the irony about it is that when I was doing it, when it first started, it got worse. Over the years, I would drop my keys more and more frequently, and the more frequently I dropped them, the more angry I got, and the more angry I got, the worse I felt because I used to beat myself up about it. And that was a second behavior. I was beating myself up because in my head, I shouldn't be feeling like this. I shouldn't be doing or reacting like this to keys dropping on the floor. It was completely insane behavior, but I couldn't seem to stop it. And I didn't know how to stop it until I found the DTO system, because it's not like there was necessarily a memory attached to it. It's not like there'd been a trauma or a negative memory attached to me dropping keys. It was just a random thing that I'd anchored in as a trigger to something else. Now, I don't know what that something else was, but I didn't need to. All I did was find the trigger, switch it off, and I no longer behaved like that. And then, ironically, once I did switch that trigger off, I remember dropping my keys again, and this time I'd sort of look down and laugh because it was just funny. It wasn't triggering that response any longer. And so since then, I very, very rarely drop my keys. Uh, it, Whereas it was literally happening every day when I was getting angry about it. So you can actually draw that situation to you, but because of the behavior, that behavior keeps the situation happening, which is part of law of attraction, which we'll come on to in another video. So behaviors can be really small like that. They can be triggered by small things, or they can be triggered by large things. So a lot of men, they do get angry, not because we're angry people, but we suppress a lot of anger. We suppress a lot of things, and that can cause problems. So one of the things I've done is work through a lot of the triggers that cause that. A lot of other types of triggers, sometimes you can just withdraw behavior, sorry, you can withdraw and go inwards. Or you can be argumentative. That's another behavior that people do. They suddenly get argumentative, or they get defensive. That's another behavior that people do. Or they'll want to run away from situations. So, typically in relationships, for instance, typical sabotage behaviors are when someone does something that the person doesn't like, they want to run away from the relationship. They want to get out. So they might break up or end the relationship too soon, rather than just addressing it with the person and dealing with the situation. So these behaviors can actually cause us to sabotage our world, and we don't always know we're doing them. Sometimes we're really aware of them, and sometimes we're not. So the relationship one, sometimes you may not be aware that you're doing anything wrong. You may be blaming the other person, it's the other person's fault. But actually, yes, what they might be saying and doing is their issue, but your behavior towards it is your behavior. And if you're trying to run away from it, or you're dealing with it in an unhealthy, your behavior is unhealthy, like you're screaming and shouting back. I actually had one couple that I was treating. I wasn't treating the couple, I was treating the lady. And one of the problems was they would mimic each other. So they both get triggered, and their behavior was to mimic each other sarcastically. Now, this is not good behavior. You shouldn't be doing this in relationships because this will just trigger the other person. So then the other person mimicked. Now, the guy in this case who was mimicking, he wasn't really the one who had the problem. The lady had trauma in her life, and that was affecting her relationships. But when she was triggered, his response, his behavior was to mimic her sarcastically. And this just put fire to the fuel. It just increased her trigger and made the whole situation worse. So these are kind of subtle behaviors that we don't always realize we're doing because we think it's the other person. So we blame the other person. We don't actually look at ourselves to see what we're doing. I've had to do that in my relationship recently and look at some of the behaviors that I've been doing. So one of the things that I used to do when I felt criticized, I would withdraw and go inside. And that didn't work because I wasn't expressing how I actually felt and I wasn't dealing with the situation. I wasn't saying, look, don't do that. I was just withdrawing and going inside and just going really quiet. And that's not a good behavior to have. You really don't want to be doing that. It's certainly better than coming out screaming and shouting and punching, and that's probably why I adopted it. I didn't want the other one. So I went to the less violent one, clearly. But it still wasn't a good behaviour. I'm not expressing myself. So a lot of the behaviours, they're kind of opposites. Whether you're withdrawing or you're being angry and aggressive, they're kind of opposites of each other. When really you want to be in the middle. You want to be neutral in the middle where you are. Once you remove the behaviour you're doing, then the emotional response goes away. Then you don't feel that way any longer. And what's really good is you no longer beat yourself up for behaving that way because most people who are good, decent people, they don't like the way they behave. A lot of us don't like our behaviors, and that is why we shy away from them. So sometimes we are aware we're doing a behavior and we can't stop ourselves from doing it because we don't understand why, which is what I'm explaining in this video. So we try and shy away from it and pretend it's not really happening. But secretly, we actually don't like ourselves for it. Secretly, we sometimes we can even loathe ourselves for our behaviors, and that's not good. And it's only because we don't think we can turn the behavior off. We think the behavior is who we are, and it's not who we are. If you're behaving in a way that you don't like, it's not who you are. It's being triggered by something. And sometimes that's why we don't want to deal with it. So a lot of men very often don't want to deal with their behavior because I think they think that's who they are. They think that makes them up and they can't change that. And that's just not true. That's not who they are. It's being triggered by something, and the trigger comes from a memory. And all that's happening is it's being triggered off, and then you behave a certain way. But that behavior can be switched off, so you go back to being you because that behavior is a fight and flight state. It's not who you are. You're just going into fight and flight. And when you go into fight and flight, you're not being you. And because it's fight and flight, it can be switched off because it shouldn't be on. Remember, fight and flight is only for danger. It's only for the moment of danger, not before or afterwards. But let's face it, most of us have never encountered real danger. So we're going into fight and flight over things that aren't dangerous for us. And then we're behaving in a way to try and protect ourselves and defend ourselves and stay, whatever it is, protect ourselves. And we're not actually in danger at that moment. So the behaviours we're adopting aren't really helpful to us. They actually hold us back. They make us beat ourselves up. They cause us to not like ourselves very much, and they ultimately cause us problems. I mean, if you're a guy and I've treated this with guys. They get angry, and they get angry in situations where they don't need to be angry, like at work. I mean, I treated a guy once, and he had anxiety, and he created a situation when he was out with some work friends that did not look good on him at work, and then he felt bad, and then he felt he couldn't work properly, and then it sort of spiraled in his work. It was affecting his work, it was affecting his work and his colleagues. It was affecting him completely just at this one event where he got really angry and he he showed his anger in front of his work colleagues while he was out for a night, and this just didn't go down well. Um, and in that moment, he didn't really need to be angry. He didn't really need to express that. Now, I'm sure we've all done that to some degree. I know I have. So with that whole COVID nonsense, I got, stressed out about that. But it doesn't really help. And I look back on that and I didn't like myself doing that or behaving that way. But I felt I was under threat at the time. So we all do it. I'm not saying we don't do it, and I've since gone and switched a lot of that off. I really had to switch a lot of that off. That was very challenging for me. But we all do these behaviours, is my point. I'm not saying I don't, because we all do. But my point is they can be switched off. And I will go back and switch them off. And it can be switched off. So if you're behaving in a way that you don't like, or you don't want to behave that way, it can be changed. It's not who you are. But that behavior can affect people in a massive way. It can affect the people around you, and it can cause people to disappear from your life or treat you the same way, or it can cause so many problems, cause relationships to end, cause your work to end. It can cause so many, you can push people away because of it. It causes so many problems, and sometimes we don't realize we're doing it. So, a simple way to know whether you're behaving in a negative way is to ask yourself, well, you know, do I go in look at a situation. So I can't speak today. Look at a situation that's not working for you. Maybe it's work, maybe it's family, maybe it's relationships, and just ask yourself, right? Well, what are my behaviours in that? What do I do in those situations? Do you get angry? Do you criticize people? This is a behaviour that we often do. Do you judge people? Do you withdraw and go quiet? Do you try and start an argument and get argumentative with people? Do you get defensive and you try and defend your corner? Do you create arguments, or do you just sit quietly in a corner and not say anything? Or do you go into your head and beat yourself up? Or do you criticize yourself and judge yourself for what you're thinking or saying or doing? Ask yourself what behavior you're doing in those moments within that situation that bothers you. So you may have a situation with a friend, for instance, and you may have had an argument with her, and maybe that friend is the one that has said the horrible things. They've said the nasty things, and so you know they said that. But check in with yourself. What behaviour, when they said those nasty things, what behaviour did you do? Did you get angry and defensive towards that person? Did you withdraw and go quiet? What behaviour were you doing? Because that's important. Your behaviour will be holding that in place and causing that to attract you more often than not. Think about a work situation. Maybe you've got a problem with a boss at work, and when your boss has a go at you, what behavior do you adopt? Or your partner has a go at you, what behaviors are you adopting when you're having an argument or a discussion, or you're having a talk? Do you get aggressive? Do you get pushy? Do you go quiet and still? Do you try and hide away in your mind? Do you just want to stand up and stomp out and get away from the situation? What behavior do you adopt? Because if you want to change that situation, if you want that to stop, whatever it is, then you need to change the behavior. We've talked about the memories and triggers, but now we're talking about the behaviors. And once you change your behavior, you'll be amazed at how the situation changes. Once you switch off the behavior you're going through, you'll be really surprised at how quickly the situation around you changes or heals or fixes itself. It really is like magic once you recognize what you're doing. It doesn't mean that the other person doesn't have a part. It doesn't mean that they didn't say the nasty thing or they didn't do the bad thing. But look at the behavior you're doing when that happens. And that is a great way to solve it. That's why I'm telling you this. I'm showing you how to solve problems and situations in your life. What do you do? How do you solve? You can't change other people. You can't stop them from being the way they are, but you can change your response to it. You can change how you behave and how you think about it, and that will have a dramatic improvement on the situation and how you feel about yourself and the world. I hope that made sense. I hope that gave you a good example of different types of triggers and why it's important and where it comes from. Different types of behaviors. Sorry, I've got triggers on the brain today. Different types of behaviors and where that comes from and how that works. Do you have any questions about that? Then just reach out to me at jonathan@thedtosystem.com. And if you like this video, if you're on Facebook, like it, love it, share it. And if you're on YouTube, subscribe, click that bell for notifications. And I look forward to seeing you on the next video. And if you'd like to learn DTO for yourself, then you can sign up to the DTO Academy. And in that DTO Academy, there are 2 free trainings, and one of the free trainings is the introduction to the DTO system. It's a 7-day introduction to DTO, so you can start learning it for free yourself and start learning how to switch off memories. So if you'd like to do that, go to www.dtoacademy.com and sign up totally free. And if you want to reach out to me, as I say, reach out to me at jonathan@thedtosystem.com. Until the next video, stay healthy, stay happy, keep smiling, and I'll speak to you soon.